are in week 2 of Shoulda, Coulda, Woulda, and today that is what we're looking at. Is how can we break free from shame and regret, and how can we move into hope and to freedom? And so we are going to talk about redeeming shame, moving through shame, and we all understand what shame is. It is that soul-crushing, identity-forming emotion that can just really destroy us. And we've all experienced it at some point in our life, and it is painful, it is deeply personal, and it is also very dangerous. Because what shame likes to do is it kind of hides in our hearts and our souls. And if we let it hang around for too long, it begins to define us and it begins to distort our view of ourselves and other people. And so how do we move on? How do we break free from shame and find freedom? And so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. But before we dive into that, let's just make sure we all understand. You all are smart people. I know this. That's why you go to Corinth Christian Church. You're the smartest of the smart, okay? There is a big difference between shame and guilt, right? Big difference between shame and guilt. In fact, Brene Brown has done TED Talks. She's written on this subject. Great researcher, great thinker, and I think she did a great job of defining the difference between guilt and shame. This is in your notes. Guilt says this. Guilt says, I did bad, okay? It says, I did something bad, but what shame says is, I am bad. And that small little change of vocabulary makes all the difference. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. And we all understand guilt. We know that feeling. I mean, this is probably not describing you by any stretch of the imagination, but you're driving 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, just cruising along, and you see the blue lights in your rear view mirror, and you begin to just feel what? You feel guilt. It's like, oh man, I'm busted. I'm going to get a ticket. My insurance is going to go up. Can I outrun him? You know, all the thoughts. All the thoughts. We're going to go Dukes of Hazzard, right? And that's what we're going to do, you know. And so but that's guilt. That's the emotion. It is guilt. Or maybe you violated the trust of a friend. They shared a secret with you, and you ended up letting it slip, and just all of a sudden it's just like, oh my goodness, I just feel so guilty. Or you're a parent or you're a grandparent, and you raise your voice in anger at your child or your grandkid or even at your spouse, and it's just like, oh my goodness, I just feel so bad. You break a promise. You take a step backward in your recovery. What is the feeling that we feel there? It's guilt. I did something wrong. Oh my goodness. And guilt, even though it is uncomfortable, it's actually healthy. It's actually very, very healthy because it helps us move to where we need to go. And so in some ways, you can think of it like this. Healthy guilt is like the check engine light on your dashboard. Y'all know the check engine light on your dashboard that you've been ignoring for the past 2 years? That one, right? And what does the check engine light do? Well, what's going on is you're driving down the road and everything seems okay. Everything seems like it's functioning properly. You don't hear any weird noises. The air conditioner is cold. You're riding along. It is smooth. And then all of a sudden, that light comes on, and it's saying to you, I know you think everything is okay with your car right now, but there is something that needs to be looked at. Because you could have a thermostat that is about to go out. Your O2 sensors aren't doing right. Or maybe you've got a piston that is not firing the way it is supposed to fire. It's like, if you don't pay attention to this now, worse things will happen. And that's what healthy guilt does. Is it kind of just comes into our life, and this feeling comes along, and it's just like, oh, wait a second. I need to do something about this. The biblical word would be, it's a feeling of conviction, right? And that conviction is what's going to motivate me to take some action. Maybe there's a difficult conversation that I've been avoiding that I need to have. Maybe there is something that I need to repent of. I need to confess. Maybe I need to swallow my pride. Maybe I need to apologize to someone. That's healthy guilt. That's healthy conviction. It motivates us. It moves us into it. But unhealthy guilt is what shame is. And so what shame is when healthy guilt sits around too long and you don't do anything with it. Maybe this has happened to you. It's late at night, and it's like, man, I want a snack. I don't want to dirty up the kitchen. And I know the kids still have some Captain Crunch in there. And so I get that big old bowl of Captain Crunch, and I'm going to get that out. And you get a bowl full, and you're ready to go. And you go to the fridge, you grab the milk, and you open it up, and you start pouring that milk into the bowl of cereal, and it comes out in clumps. Oh, come on now. You've had that happen to you, right? You just power through and eat it anyway? Because no, you don't do that, right? But what is that? What is that? Well, the milk at one point was good, and it had a purpose. It sat there. It was in the fridge, but it sat there too long, and so it became expired, and it was no longer any good. Healthy guilt, whenever it sits there for too long and we don't do anything about it, it will eventually expire. It will spoil, and it will begin to just turn into something foul. And so what we will do then is, with this expired guilt, is we will start to connect what we did with who we are. And that's when shame starts to just kind of creep into our life, and it becomes identity-based. And so instead of saying something like, I made a mistake, we start saying things like, what? I am a mistake. Instead of saying things like, well, I failed, we start saying things like, I am a failure. Or instead of saying things like, I've hurt people or I've let people down, we start saying things like, I am just a worthless human being. And so it moves past what we've done, and then it becomes a voice. It becomes this voice that you just can't silence. And it starts saying, you are unworthy. You are unlovable. You are unsavable. And it could be because of a secret. It could be because of a financial secret, a past secret, an addiction. It could be because of failure, rejection, or betrayal. But it just creates this feeling deep inside of you just saying, I'm never going to measure up. And what shame does is it says to us, because of what I have done, I am now beyond repair. I am unfixable. And so today what we're going to do is we want to explore hope. How do we break free from that, move from shame to freedom? And I want to show you how Jesus has come to meet you in your shame, and that he doesn't just see what you have done, but he sees who you are. He sees who you can be, and he wants to restore you into who he created you to be. To do that, we're going to look at John chapter 4. So if you got a Bible, I'd love for you to go to John chapter 4. It's in your notes. It'll be on the screen as well. It's a famous story. It's about a woman carrying some shame. She is isolated, and then Jesus steps into her life, and he provides hope for her that she has never had in her life before. We're going to start off here in verse 4, and this is what John tells us. It says, he had to go. Everybody say had to go. He had to go through Samaria on the way. And eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well. It was about noontime. And so John says he had to go. If you're taking notes, you might want to circle, underline, highlight that. And here's what I want you to know. That is kind of true geographically, definitely true theologically. It's kind of true geographically because Samaria is between Judea and Galilee. And Jesus is headed back to Galilee. Judea is in the south, Galilee's to the north. Samaria is right smack dab in the middle of those two things. So if you put it into your GPS, say, give me the most direct, the quickest route, and avoid highways and tolls, it's going to go up through Samaria to get you to Galilee. So that is the shortest route to do that. And so he kind of had to go through Samaria to do that, but he also didn't have to. Because the Jews and the Samaritans, they get along like cats and dogs, and they can't stand each other. And so most Jews would take the long route. They're like, I would rather travel 500 miles out of my way. It wasn't 500 miles, but I'd rather travel all this route out of my way just so I don't even have to step foot in Samaria. So it's kind of true geographically that he has to go through Samaria, but it is definitely true theologically. Because that phrase, he had to go, what it does, and whenever John is writing this, is it implies this like divine purpose, this necessity for him to actually go through Samaria. And it's a phrase that is used in other places by Jesus that connects with his mission. One of them is in Luke chapter 9:22, whenever Jesus says, the Son of Man must suffer many things. That's that same phrase, had to, has to. So it is a divine implication. There is this theological thing here that it is this journey through Samaria is a divine appointment that God set forth so that Jesus and this woman, whom we're about to meet, would interact. And so he had to go through this route because God had something in store for this lady who is in pain and is isolated. So verse 7, it says, soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, please give me a drink. He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. And the woman was, say it with me, she was what? She was surprised, for Jews refuse to have anything to do with Samaritans. And she said to Jesus, you are a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink? And so at this point, Jesus is there. He's sitting there by himself. He's there on this well, Jacob's well. And this woman, she approaches at a very, very unusual time. She's going there in the middle of the day. If you've been in church for a while, you know this is a weird time for her to go. It's the middle of the day in the Middle East. That means the temperature is up. It is hot. And so most people, most women, would go get the water early in the morning to avoid the heat, but it was also a social gathering to where the ladies would just go together. If you've ever been to a restaurant with a group of ladies, you know they all go to the bathroom together. That is how this worked as well. It's like they're going to go get water together so they can chit-chat and talk about all the things that are going on. And so this woman doesn't go at the normal time. She doesn't go at the normal time. She's going midday instead of the morning. And she goes all by herself. And so she's going because she doesn't want anybody to be there. That's her whole goal. You know, she's trying to hit the grocery store during the Georgia game so she doesn't see anybody, right? That's what she's trying to do. She's trying to avoid everybody. Why? Because shame is running and ruining her life. She is tired, y'all. She's tired of the looks. She's tired of the whispers. She's tired of all the gossip. She's tired of all the sideways glances. She's just exhausted from it all. Did any of y'all know what that feels like? I mean, I don't know, maybe you're watching online or maybe you've walked in here today, and I just wonder, have you ever avoided people or situations because you just couldn't stand the looks or the whispers? In fact, there will be somebody who is in this room today, whether it's in this service or in the other two services or in the service over there, where today is the first time you've walked back into church in who knows how long. And the reason that you've stayed away is because you've just kind of got this story that you've been telling yourself. If I walk in there, if the roof doesn't fall down, if I walk in there, then they're going to look at me. They're going to know what I did. They're going to know who I am. They're going to know my story. They're going to know about this. They're going to know about that. And they're all going to look around and go, what are they doing here? Why are they here? What is going on? There's going to be whispers, sideways glances. There's going to be all these things. And you've just I just can't even begin to get the courage to walk into a place like that. But something has been going on in your life to where you're just at this point where it's like, I got to get water somewhere. And so you've walked in today and you're just like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Some of you, you're watching online and you've been watching online for a really long time because you have that fear. You are scared to death to walk into this place because you just carry so much shame. And if that's you, then you really empathize with this lady here, don't you? Because she's just sick of it. She's sick and tired of being sick and tired. So she's like, I'll go in the middle of the day. I don't care how hot it is. I just don't want to see anybody. I don't want to be around anybody. I'm just going to go get my water. That's all I need to do. I don't want to talk. And so you can imagine her. She's walking and she's headed towards this well and she's approaching. She's got her jar. She's hoping to be alone. She's hoping to not encounter anybody. And as she begins to walk up, she looks up at the well, and off in the distance, she can see that there's somebody there at the well, sitting on the well, and her heart just sinks. She's like, oh my goodness. And she gets closer and closer, and she goes, oh, it's a man? Oh my goodness. And she gets closer and closer. It's a Jewish man? Oh my goodness. All I need is some water for the day. And she approaches this well, and it's just this awkward just kind of moment. Because in the first century, men and women, they didn't talk to each other in public unless they were married. And so she's walking up to this place, and she's like, great, all I need is another rumor started about me. I heard she was up at the well with some guy on Thursday afternoon. That's just what I need in my life. And then it says that she was surprised that Jesus spoke to her. And it's not just, she wasn't surprised just because he spoke to her. I think she's surprised at how he spoke to her. Because you can imagine Jesus, if you know enough about Jesus, I mean, you can just almost see the warmth in his eyes, the care in his eyes, the value that he is putting on her. And he is looking at her in a way that a man has probably never looked at her in her life. And she's like, well, this is different. This is kind of shocking. And she can tell by his voice, his body language, that this guy is just different, but yet she's still kind of guarded. Why are you asking me for water? What's going on here? And she's just guarded because that's what shame does. And so the conversation just moves along, and Jesus starts to shift it, and he doesn't dwell on what other people may focus on. He actually goes deeper. He's like, you're here for water, but let me tell you about living water, or you'll never thirst again. And she's like, well, I'm really thirsty. I would love to never thirst again. And so Jesus then moves past that, and he says, well, what about if we don't just talk about living water? How about we go where nobody else would go with you? And he says in verse 16, he's like, so go and get your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. Now, it's funny, in the original language, this lady, she is a regular chatty Cathy. I mean, she is just all kinds of things. But whenever it comes to this section and this response, NLT has, I don't have a husband. That's 5 words. In the Greek, it's 3. And you literally translate it like this: husband, have no. She's just like, I don't want to talk about this. But then look at what Jesus says. Jesus says to her, you're right. You don't have a husband. You've had 5. And the guy you're living with right now, you're not even married to him. You certainly spoke the truth. And it's like, we're reading this story from here, and this is like, if it's the first time, you're like, whoa, danger, Jesus, careful here. Like, man, you're like wandering into something. You never ask a woman that question, right? Might as well ask her how much she weighs. And it's just like going through here. But Jesus is like, no. Let me press into the pain. Let me press into the shame. And the reason is, he wants something for her. That's what he wants. And so he goes into this sensitive place in her life, and he's like, this is why you're going to the well alone. This is why you're here at the middle of the day. And so he doesn't back away from it. He doesn't shy away from it. He just goes right at it. And what he does, notice this, is he opens the door for conviction to replace condemnation. That's what he's doing. And he's like, all right, let's get healthy guilt going here. Let's get conviction going here, not condemnation. He's like, let me allow you to hold on to your dignity. Let me allow you to hold on to your worth. And in John, whenever he's writing this, he actually emphasizes the word right and truth. Okay, he emphasizes those words. And so what he is implying is that Jesus is excited. He is excited that she said those two things, or that she said the truth here. He is excited. He is thrilled because she's not trying to hide. He is proud of her because she's not trying to keep things from him. Because listen to me, the one thing that God will never reject, hear me, church, is authenticity. That's the one thing he will never reject. Whenever we say, I've got nothing to hide before you, Lord, I'm going to lay it all out here. And if you come to God and if you are real, hear me, he will receive you. He will welcome you. In fact, the one thing that God cannot stand, self-righteousness. Whenever we try to hide, whenever we try to conceal, whenever we try to cover up, and whenever we go, I'm just not going there. But the woman, she's like, I'll come clean. There's no need for a mask. I don't need to hide this anymore. It's a lot different than Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3, is it not? If you don't remember that story, they sin, they disobey God, and as soon as they sin, their eyes are open, they are filled with shame, okay? And then they decide that they're going to run away, and I love it. They're like, we're going to hide from God in the garden that God created. He'll never find us. Why? Because shame makes us stupid, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. We do stupid things then. And they're trying to conceal their sin from God. But what they didn't understand is that hiding is where shame grows. That's where it just begins to grow, because hiding takes healthy guilt, healthy conviction, and turns it into unhealthy shame. Because remember, what is guilt? I did something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. And so Adam and Eve, they hide because of their sin. They hide because of their shame. But this woman at the well, she's like, I don't even need to hide. I'll tell you why I'm here at the middle of the day and why I didn't want to see anybody today. Because I've had 5 husbands, and the guy I'm not living with, that's not him either. And so Jesus says, I want to free you from that shame. And then if you jump down to verse 28, it says, so then after this conversation, the woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? You might want to underline that she left her water jar beside the well. That thing that she had brought thinking that she was going to need water there. She's like, I don't need this anymore because I don't need this water. I found living water. I found hope. I found freedom. I found deliverance. I have found something far better. And then she runs off, and I love it. She just runs off inviting anyone who will listen. He told me everything I ever did. Do you want to hear that? And all the guys were like, actually, yeah, we'd be really interested to hear all that. And so they go there, and we read that, and we're like, well, why would I ever want to do that? That sounds kind of embarrassing, right? Say, I mean, Jesus told me everything I ever did. Do you want to hear? That sounds embarrassing. And the woman's like, well, not really, because he told me everything. I mean, he already knows everything about me, and news alert, he knows everything about you. So what is the point in hiding anymore? There's no reason. And so instead of being ashamed, if you'll just meet this guy, you'll be set free. He'll give you life. He'll give you value. And so in the beginning of the story, she is isolated. She is filled with shame. She meets Jesus, and she runs to community so that she can share the good news. And what once isolated her is now the catalyst of her story. And so she goes from avoiding people to running to people because she is now filled with so much hope. And the shame that isolated her now is the very thing that God uses to set her free and send her out with hope. And friends, the same transformation is available for you and for me whenever we come to Jesus Christ, because many of us, we are carrying shame. We are overwhelmed with it. It is because of things that we have done or things that were done to us, and that shame is keeping you from living fully in Jesus Christ and experiencing the freedom that he has for us. And so in our last few minutes together, I want to answer 2 questions today. I want to answer this question: how can I tell if I'm living out of shame? And then how can I move forward and walk in freedom instead? So how can I tell if I'm living out of shame? And the thing we're going to do is this: we are going to watch out for negative self-talk. Right? We're going to watch out for negative self-talk. Now, if you've been here for a few months or anything, you've heard us say this before, but no one talks to you more than you. Okay? And I'm not just talking about you're sitting there at your computer talking to yourself. What am I doing here? How do I get this spreadsheet to work? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about no one has as much influence and self-influence than you do, because you talk to yourself all the time. And so if we're going to see if we're living in shame, we're going to be just examining, what is it that I say to myself the most? And whenever we are overwhelmed with shame, you're going to start to hear some negative self-talk things like this. Maybe you've heard yourself say this to yourself. You know what? I'd be worthy if. Man, I'd be worthy if I could just get that scholarship, then I would feel worthy. You know what? If I could just save my marriage, man, then I would be worthy. Man, if I could just get pregnant, then I think that my life would be worth everything. If I would be worthy if I could just kick this addiction, if I could just get that raise, if I could just get that promotion, then I would be worthy. I would be worthy if that's shame. Here's another one. You know, if they only knew. Man, if they only knew what I did in college. If they only knew about what I did on that last business trip, if they only knew what my browser history looked like, if If they only knew about that DUI I got, if they only knew about that emotional affair I've been having, if they only knew about the addiction, then they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. There's another one, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough man for my wife and my kids. They'd be better without me. I'm not enough for this job. I'm not qualified. I'm just not enough. I can't do it. It's just a matter of time before they find out that I'm a fraud. I'm not enough. I'll never be my dad. I'll never be my grandpa. I'll never be like them. I'll never be like him. I'm just not enough. I can't do this I just can't do this. And friends, whenever we start to have that just negative self-talk just kind of going on, that's a sign that shame is taking over. Because even though you've been forgiven, you're still living with shame-based thinking. And you're believing something about yourself that God says isn't true. And that's a big sign that you are living in shame right now. So how can we move forward from shame? How do we move forward from this? Well, we're going to shift the focus from what I am not to who Christ is. So we're going to shift the focus from what I am not to who Christ is. So here's the tricky thing about all this. You know, anytime you think, you know, you are something bad, the problem is that there is some truth to it, right? It's like you think, well, I am bad. And it's like, well, that is true. We're all sinners. You know, we've all sinned. We all fall short of the glory of God. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that is true. It's like, oh, I am inadequate. And it's like, well, that is true, you know, because we weren't designed to do everything on our own or in our own strength. Or it's like, you know, I am weak. You know, it's like, well, yeah, you know, I am rude, definitely. You know, and it's just like all these things are there. The problem with them is that there is some truth to those things. But the bigger truth is this: as long as you are focused on you, you'll never be enough. That's the bigger truth. Whenever you focus on your inadequacies, how unworthy you feel, insufficient, how hopeless you are, you begin to miss the truth of who Jesus Christ says you are. And so the key to all of this is to stop focusing on your failings and focus on the power and the grace that is available through Jesus Christ. And so how are we going to do that? And we're going to do a simple exercise, is we're going to learn to fill in the blank. All right, we're going to fill in the blank. Here's what I mean. So here's the statement. I am not blank. Because of Jesus, I am this, right? So I am not this, but because of Jesus, I am this. So what do I mean? I am not bad, but because of Christ, I am forgiven. I am not sick, but because of Christ, I am healed. I am not broken, because of Christ, I am new. I am not disgusting, because of Jesus, I am loved. Because listen, you're not your past. You're not what you did. You're not what someone did to you. You are not who others think you are. You're not even who you think you are. You are who Jesus says you are. That's who you are. Hebrews chapter 12 talks about how Jesus took on our shame, and the picture is that like Jesus got into a boxing ring like Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, and they got in there, except for he actually fought, and so he gets in there and he takes on the shame. He takes it down. Isaiah 54 says, "Fear not, for you will no longer live in shame. Don't be afraid, there is no more disgrace for you." 2 Corinthians 5 says this, "For God made Christ, who never sinned, to be the offering for our sins, so that we could be made right with God through Christ," meaning he has accomplished everything sufficient for your salvation. Everything that is necessary for your salvation has been accomplished in Jesus Christ. And so because of that, you listen to me, you can say this. You can say, I know he loves me. I know he has my best in mind. I know I can lean into this truth. I know I can be open and willing to pay attention to what he calls out in me. I know I can grow. I know that when I fail, I can lean into his grace all the more. Why? Because I am free, I am forgiven, I am changed, I am redeemed, I am healed, I am blessed, I am chosen, I am complete, I am accepted, I am a child of God, and that is who I am. Amen? That's who you are. And that's where your identity comes from. It's not what you've done that defines you. It's who he is and what he has done for you and what he declares about you. So how can I tell that I'm living in shame. Well, we're going to keep an eye out for that negative self-talk. And how do we move forward from that? We're going to shift our focus. We're going to shift our focus from what we've done to what Jesus has done for us. Bottom line is this: you are not defined by what you've done, but by who Jesus says you are. You're not defined by what you did on your worst day. You're defined by what happened to Jesus on our worst day. So my challenge to you this week is to think through this question. And who needs to be encouraged by your story? And then I want you to encourage somebody with that story. That might mean that you need to go to coffee with somebody this week. You might need to go to lunch. You might need to make a phone call, something of that nature, and just say, I think that they would be encouraged to hear that I've been through something similar and that, Jesus has worked through in my life through this. I'm going to tell you, maybe not everything that I ever did, but I'm going to tell you how Jesus has been at work in my life. And could it be that he's the Messiah? Now, if you've never told your story before, it can feel kind of awkward and clunky. And so we've created a place on our website to help you practice. It's called corinth.cc/story. If you visit that webpage, it's got a little form there, and it's got all kinds of different things, how God could be working in your life. And that gives you just a chance to just be able to say, I want to practice telling my story. Here's how God has been answering my prayers, or here's how God has been working in our marriage, or here's how God has been doing this. And then you've got that there, because then you've spent some time thinking about how you want to articulate what God's been doing. And then you'll be ready to encourage someone else, just like this woman in John 4. It's been said before that her mess became the message, and let our mess become a message as well for others. So encourage somebody with your story this week, because your shame doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to define you, because whenever you come to Jesus, everything changes. I love Psalm 34, verse 5. It says this: those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. And today you may feel like shame is weighing you down and that your past and your mistakes are defining you. But whenever you look to Jesus and you encounter his grace, he takes the shame away and he replaces it with radiance. Because you are no longer who you thought that you were. And through Jesus' life, through his death, through his burial, and his resurrection, you can experience transformation and no longer have to hide your face in shame. So today, if you want to take the step of following Jesus for the very first time, experiencing the blessing of baptism, experiencing the transformation that comes there, if you're watching online, then you can visit the website on the screen and say, I'm ready to go all in with Jesus. If you're in the room, you can grab your connection card or your welcome home card and just say, I am ready to be set free and experience the transformation that comes from Jesus and Jesus alone. Fill that card out, drop it in a bucket, or bring it up to me after the service, and let's begin. Let's begin this new life in him. So Jesus, today we thank you so much that you define who we are, and that we are not defined by our worst mistakes, but we are defined by your incredible grace and what you say about us. And so today, Father, help us to walk out of here beginning to experience freedom from shame, to break free from what is shackling us, to leave behind what we thought that we really needed and run off to tell others about the great work that you are doing in us. And we pray that in your name. Amen and amen. Blessings on your head.